Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Yud Dalet Amud Beis, 14b of Maseches Brachos. We are starting from the very bottom line of the page. In the middle of the line it says, Ve'amar Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Yochanan said, continuing from something he had previously said, and Rabbi Yochanan said, Harotzeh she'ikabel olav ol malchus shamayim shlema. A person who wants to accept upon himself the yoke of heaven in a complete and perfect way should do the following. Top of the next page. Yefane. He should first make sure to relieve himself before davening. V'yitol yadav, and wash his hands. V'yaniach tefillin, and put on tefillin. V'yikra kriya shema, and read the Shema. V'yispala, and then daven. V'zui malchus shamayim shlema, and this is a full acceptance of the yoke of heaven. Now we understand why tefillin, Kriya Shema, Shemona Esrei, that's part of the acceptance of the yoke of heaven. What about going to the bathroom and washing one's hands? So it seems that the idea is that it's about preparation, a full Kabbalas Malchus Shamayim, a full acceptance of the yoke of heaven. A proper tefillah is one that's done with the proper preparation before, with the making sure a person's body is clean, with making sure that their hands are clean and pure, and they've washed away any tumah, any impurity. So a full acceptance of the yoke of heaven is done with the right preparation. Amar Reb Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Reb Chia bar Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Kol hanifna v'notel yadav v'niach tefillin v'kar kriya shema mispalel. Anybody who does this, relieves themselves, washes their hands, puts on tefillin, reads Shema, and daven Shemona Esrei, Malel rabakasav ki lubana mizbeach. The Torah considers it as if he built a mizbeach, v'hikrav olav karban, and brought a offering upon that mizbeach. Dichsiv, as the pasuk says. Now, before we see the pasuk, so again the comparison the Young Yaakov explains is like we described, that you've prepared a mizbeach is a place that's set aside, that's clean, that's pure for the bringing of karbanos, and with the proper preparation, a person has purified themselves for serving Hashem, for davening. So that's the comparison, and the source for the comparison is a pasuk in Tehillim that says, Erchatz b'nikayon kapai, I will wash my hands with cleanliness, v'asovas mizbachacha Hashem, and I will go around, I will circle the mizbeach of Hashem. That's the pasuk that he quotes. Now that pasuk mentions washing hands before bringing a karban. It doesn't say anything about washing hands before tefillah. It also doesn't mention anything about going to the bathroom. So how do we get, first of all, the relieving oneself into the equation? How do we get tefillah into this equation? So the Marsha says that there's another pasuk that also uses the same terminology. There's another pasuk that says, Erchatz b'nikayon kapai, I'll wash my hands with cleanliness. And there, the pasuk says, it's also in Tehillim. It's a different chapter though. Our chapter is 26, and this next pasuk is in chapter 73, Ayin Gimel, and it says, Ach reik zachisi levavi va'erchat b'nikayon kapai. So, and reik is like to empty. So he says that's a reference to relieving oneself. Zachisi levavi, my heart has merited. So he says that avoda shabalev, the Gemara says that avoda shabalev, service of the heart, is tefillah. So zachisi levavi, my heart is merited, is a reference to tefillah. And then it says I wash my hands. So, and we make a connection between this pasuk and our pasuk, which talks about going around the mizbeach, to teach me to connect these two ideas, that one relieves themselves and then davens, and also washes their hands in the mix. So that's like this other pasuk that talks about going around the mizbeach, talks about bringing karbanos. Okay, Amar le Rava. Rava said to him, Lo savar lamar ki ilu taval? You don't also hold like it's as if one immersed in the mikveh, if you wash your hands before davening? It's as if you immersed your body. Dichsiv, because the pasuk says erchatz b'nikayon, v'lo kasav architz kapai. So it says, I will wash in cleanliness. Literally, I will bathe in cleanliness, I guess. And it doesn't say I will wash my hands. And it seems that the grammar, the language here, that if it just was talking about washing hands, it could have just said architz kapai, I wash my hands. Why does it say erchatz b'nikayon kapai? Erchatz sounds more like I will immerse, I will bathe b'nikayon cleanliness, kapai, my hands. So it's saying, Rav was saying a drasha at least, that it's saying that through my hands I wash myself, I wash my body. It's considered as if I've immersed in a mikvah. Okay. Amar le Ravina le Rava. Ravina said to Rava, Chazi mar haitzur b'mirabanan. Has you, my master, seen this certain rabbinic student? The Asami Marav, who came from the west, he came from Eretz Yisrael, to Bavel, to Babylonia. V'amar, and he said the following teaching, Mishe'ein lo mayim lirchotz yadav, if a person doesn't have any water to wash their hands to daven, or to say Shema, we'll see. Well, actually, this is more general. If a person doesn't have water to wash their hands for tefillah, mekaneach yadav ba'afar uvitzror v'ksamim. They can wipe their hands off in dirt, or on a rock, or on a twig of wood, and that's another way to clean one's hands if one doesn't have water. Amar le, Rabba said, Shapir ka'amar. He's saying good. What he's saying is very good. Because miksiv erchatz b'mayim, does it say I'll wash in water? In that pasuk it says erchatz b'nikayim, ksiv, in cleanliness, which teaches me that kol midi dimenaki, anything that will clean my hands. So if I have something dirty on my hands and I can wipe it on a piece of wood or a rock, that works. If I have something that will come off if I rub dirt on it, rubbing in dirt, I guess like something liquidy or something will come off, so that works too. The ideal way to do it is with water, but if a person doesn't have water, then these other methods can work too. And because of that, he kind of backs it up and says, Daharav Chista Layit Amad Mahadir Amaya B'idan Susa. Reb Chista would curse out the person who was looking all over for water when it was time to daven. Now we don't just mean any time to daven, we mean Hagimili L'Kriyah Shema. When the time is running out, I'm reciting Shema, and a person is looking for water to wash their hands, Reb Chista would say, curse, just wipe your hands on a rock and say Shema in time. Don't miss the time for saying Shema because you're chasing after water to wash your hands. Just clean your hands on something else. Now this we say is if you're running out of time for Shema. Aval, with tefillah, but for Shemona Esrei, Mahader, one should go looking for water. One shouldn't rely on wiping their hands. And that's because tefillah, Rashi says, you have all day to daven. Now what he means by that is a little unclear. We do have limits on the times for tefillah too. It could be that since the times are only d'Rabbanan, tefillah in general is d'Rabbanan, maybe our priorities are shifting and we say it is more important to wash your hands with water than to daven on time. I'm not sure. But that's what it sounds like. Now, ve'ad kama, how far does a person have to go to get water to daven for tefillah? So, it says Gemara ad parsa, up to a parsa. A parsa is a distance of 4 mil, the amount of time that it takes. It's about 72 minutes, amount of time you will walk in 72 minutes. V'hani mili likame. Now that which we say that you have to walk up to a parsa, up to 4 mil, to get water is if it's anyways on your way. You're going in that direction, so you may as well get there, find water, and then daven. But if it's out of your way, afilu mil eino choser. You don't even have to go a mil out of your way. 18 minutes walk out of your way. However, we can infer from the way he said it, he says you don't have to go a mil. But mil deino choser hapachos mil choser. You don't have to go a mil, but less than a mil you would have to go. So if a person has dirty hands, they need to clean their hands for davening, then they are required to go out of their way up to an 18-minute walk, not more, or not equal, less than 18 minutes, up to 18 minutes, to find water. And if it's on the way that they're going anyways, then they should proceed up to 4 mil, up to a parsa, 72 minutes, to get water before they daven. Okay, says the Mishnah. Next Mishnah. Hakarei es Shema. The person who reads Shema, v'lo ishmiya la'azno, and he doesn't hear it, it's not audible when he reads the Shema, Yatsa, he's still Yotze. The first opinion of the Mishnah holds, you don't actually have to say the words out loud, you have to say them, but you don't have to be able to hear them. Rabbi Yossi Omer, lo Yatsa. Rabbi Yossi says you're not Yotze. You have to be able to hear them. Now, Kara v'lo diktik vos yoseh. Let's say a person read Shema, but they weren't so careful about the words, so they didn't pronounce them perfectly. Rabbi Yossi Omer Yatsa. Rabbi Yossi says you're still Yotze. Sounds like you get the general word, it's enough. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Lo Yatsa. Rabbi Yehuda says you are not Yotze. Hakoreh L'mafreya. The person reads Shema out of order. Lo Yatsa. They're not Yotze. Kara V'ta'a. Let's say, fine, so if you read the verses out of order, you're not Yotze. Kara V'ta'a. If a person was reading Shema and they lost track, they make a mistake, they don't know where they were up to, Yachzer l'makom sheta. You should go back to where you erred, meaning, I guess, to where you know for sure that you got it right, and actually, it could be here, it's just where you made a mistake. You know you said the wrong thing, you go back to the last place that you know was right, and you pick up from there and say the right thing. Okay. Says the Gemara, going back on the first part of the Mishnah, the discussion about whether you have to be able to hear yourself when you say Shema, do the words have to be audible? My taima de Rabbi Yossi. What is Rabbi Yossi's reason that he said that you're not Yotze if you can't hear the words? Mishum d'chsev, because the pasuk says, Shema, hear, O Israel, which teaches me, Hishama laznecha ma she'ata motzi mipicha, that you have to be able to hear with your ears what you say with your mouth. That's Rabbi Yossi. V'tanakama, the first opinion in the Mishnah, Savar, Shema, hear the words, B'chol lashon shata shomeh. It's a different teaching from the word Shema. That Shema doesn't teach me that you have to be able to hear the words, but it's teaching you that it can be in any language that you can understand, any language that you hear. Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yossi will respond to that and say, Tarti Shmamina, we learn both things from it. We learn that it has to be audible, and we also learn that it can be in any language that you understand. Okay. Tanana Hasam. We learned elsewhere in a Mishnah. The Mishnah is in Maseches Trumos. The Mishnah says, Cheresh hamedaber ve'eno shomea. If you have a person who's deaf, they can speak, a deaf person who knows how to speak but can't hear. So, lo yitrom. Ideally, he shouldn't be the one to separate truma. So, truma is what's separated from produce to go to the Kohen. A bracha is made when one separates truma, and therefore, since this person, they can't hear their own bracha, so it's not ideal for them to be the one to separate the truma. So, lo yitrom, he shouldn't separate truma. V'im taram, but if he did separate truma, trumasa truma, then it's still valid. It takes effect. The produce that he separates now, truma, belongs to the Kohen. Okay. Now, man tana cheresh hamedaber ve'eno shomea di'avadim l'chatchila lo. Who's this opinion that's telling us that l'chatchila, ideally, this cheresh, this deaf person who could speak but not hear, ideally, l'chatchila, they shouldn't separate truma, but if they do, b'di'avad, after the fact, it's still okay. Who's the Tana who holds like that? So, Amar Rabbi Chisda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chisda said it's Rabbi Yossi, from our Mishnah. Because in our Mishnah it says, Shema, V'lo yishmi'a la'azno, if a person reads Shema and they can't hear what they're saying, yatsa. The Tanna Kama said you are yotze, and although we didn't have this in our Mishnah, the Gemara says, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, these are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Now the Bach takes it out, but as we'll see, we associate this opinion, or I guess potentially with Rabbi Yehuda. So we'll come back to that. But the Tanna Kama, the first opinion of the Mishnah said, if you read Shema and you don't hear yourself, you're still Yotze. Rabbi Yossi Omer lo Yatsa. And Rabbi Yossi said you're not Yotze. Okay, so when it comes to Shema, Rabbi Yossi says if you can't hear it, sounds like even b'diavad you're not Yotze, even after the fact. And Adkam lo kama Rabbi Yossi lo Yatsa el gabe Kriya Shema deraisa. But we can make the argument that Rabbi Yossi only said that by Kriya Shema, which is a deraisa. That's where you're not Yotze if you can't hear what you said. And he has a drasha, right? He's Shema, right? You have to be able to hear it. Aval Truma, but Truma, why do you need to be able to hear yourself separate Truma? You don't. All you need to be able to hear at most is your bracha. Mishum brachahu. Ubracha derabanan. The bracha on Truma is only derabanan. The idea of separating Truma may be deraisa. But the bracha that you make on it is only derabanan. So, v'lo bracha talya milsa, and its ability to take effect is not dependent on the bracha. The act of separating Truma is what makes it Truma. So, and the bracha is only derabanan, and it's not ma'akev, it's not essential. B'diavad it would work. So lichatchila, ideally, we want somebody to separate the Truma who will make the bracha and hear the bracha. But b'diavad, if somebody who can't hear separated Truma and didn't hear the bracha, then it still works. So we're suggesting, because in our Mishnah we have two opinions. Our Mishnah has, when it comes to Shema, one opinion says that it's totally fine that you can't hear the Shema. Now that doesn't sound like the case by Truma. We didn't say it's totally fine. We said, l'chatchila, you shouldn't do it, but diavad it works. So it doesn't seem like the Tanna Kama is the opinion by Truma. So it must be it's Rabbi Yossi. But it's not, because Rabbi Yossi said that by us, by Shema, you're not Yotze at all. Not l'chatchila, not b'diavad. So how could that align itself with the opinion by Truma? And the Gemara is explaining that it could be Rabbi Yossi, and that's going to be our first pick. Because maybe we'll say, Rabbi Yossi only said that by Shema, which is Daraisa, it doesn't work if you can't hear yourself. But by Truma, where the bracha is only Darabanan, then even ideally, l'chatchila, you shouldn't do it, but b'diavad, somebody you can't hear, if they separate Truma, it will still work. Okay, ask the Gemara. Umimai Rabbi Yossi. Who says it's Rabbi Yossi? Dilma Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe it's Rabbi Yehuda. Ve'amar gabe kriya shema nami. Now the Gemara is assuming, as I mentioned before, that the Tanna Kama is Rabbi Yehuda. So that the first opinion in the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. So now we're saying, well, maybe actually the opinion about Truma could fit with the first opinion of our Mishnah. Maybe it could be Rabbi Yehuda. V'amar gabe kriya shema nami diavad in l'chatchila. Even in our Mishnah, he meant that only b'diavad works. When our Mishnah says, Hakarei Shema v'loshmiya la'azno yotze, the first opinion, you read the Shema and you can't hear it, you're still Yotze, it meant b'diavad. L'chatchila, you shouldn't do it. L'chatchila, if you can't hear yourself, you shouldn't do it. B'diavad, it would work. Teda, and says the Gemara, I'll show you that this makes sense. Dikatani, because it says in the Mishnah, Hakarei, one who read. It doesn't say, go ahead and read it. It says, b'diavad, one who read. Diavad in l'chatchila lo. B'diavad, yes, l'chatchila lo. If one read Shema and couldn't hear it, they're still Yotze. It sounds like b'diavad l'chatchila. You should make sure you can hear it. So, says the Gemara, Amri, we can say back to that, no. Hai dekatani akare. That the reason why it said it in b'diavad fashion, one who read the Shema, is lodiacha kochod Rabbi Yossi. That's to show you how far Rabbi Yossi goes. De Amar Diavad Namilo, who says that even b'diavad, it doesn't work. Di Rabbi Yehuda afilu lechatchila nami yatsa, because Rabbi Yehuda holds that even lechatchila you are yotze. So the Gemara says, no, we would rather read the Mishnah as follows. We'd rather read the Mishnah the way it reads simply, I guess. That one who reads Shema and can't hear it, they're yotze, and that's Rabbi Yehuda, and that's even lechatchila you can read Shema even though you can't hear yourself speak. And the reason why it said it in a b'diavad fashion, one who did it, their yotze, was to bring out Rabbi Yossi, that even then Rabbi Yossi says not yotze, even b'diavad. So at this point in the Gemara, we're reading the Mishnah, I guess, at face value, basically, that the Tanna Kama holds, go ahead. It doesn't matter that you can't hear yourself, read Shema, separate Truma, it doesn't make a difference. And therefore, the Tanna Kama of our Mishnah can't be the author of the Mishnah in Trumos. So it must be Rabbi Yossi. But Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah said that you're not Yotze by Shema, and there by Truma we say b'diavad it works. So we'll say that's because Truma is only D'Rabbanan, and the Brachos is only D'Rabbanan, that's why b'diavad it works, even if you can't hear. But Shema, which is D'Oraisa, and in particular we have an explicit drasha. We have a drasha that teaches me that you have to be able to hear it. So that's why Rabbi Yossi will say that even b'diavad you're not Yotze by Shema if you can't hear yourself. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi. So who are you saying our Mishnah is like? The Mishnah of Trumos, you're saying it's like Rabbi Yossi. Well, let me throw some other Mishnayos into the mix that are going to create problems for us. Ve'elaha what about the following Brisa? The Brisa says, Lo yevarech adam birkas hamazon b'libo. A person shouldn't bench in their heart without saying the words. Ve'im birech yatsa. And if they did, they're yotze. So even though they didn't pronounce the words, they benched in their heart. So lechatchila you shouldn't do it. B'diavad you're yotze. Now mani, who's that going like? Lo Rabbi Yossi, v'lo Rabbi Yehuda. That's not going to fit in our version of Rabbi Yossi, nor in our version of Rabbi Yehuda. Di Rabbi Yehuda, because if it was Rabbi Yehuda, ha'amar lechatchila nami yatsa. We're holding right now that according to the Tanna Kama, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that even lechatchila you don't need to be able to hear yourself. He said that when it comes to Shema, you don't have to be able to hear yourself. So the same will be true for benching, for Birkas Hamazon. You shouldn't have to be able to hear yourself. And lechatchila you could do it without hearing yourself. So this Brisa though says that lechatchila you can't bench without hearing yourself. Only b'diavad after the fact it would work. So it can't be Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yossi, and if it's going to be Rabbi Yossi, diavad namilo, like even b'diavad it shouldn't work because Birkas Hamazon is D'Oraisa. It's a Torah requirement like Kriya Shema. And we're suggesting right now that when it comes to Torah requirements, Rabbi Yossi says that even b'diavad, it doesn't work if you can't hear yourself. And it's only by Truma, which was D'Rabbanan, that b'diavad works. So this Brisa, which says that by Birkas Hamazon, which is a Torah requirement, that b'diavad works, it can't be Rabbi Yossi. So Elamai Rabbi Yehuda. So let's go back and say, rather we have to say it is Rabbi Yehuda. And v'diavad in lechatchila lo. And really, let's backtrack on our whole approach. That when it comes to benching, lechatchila you shouldn't do it, b'diavad it works. When it comes to truma, lechatchila you shouldn't do it without hearing it, but b'diavad it works. And when it comes to Kriya Shema, our Mishnah, you have to read the Tanna Kama, you have to read Rabbi Yehuda, that he meant, if you read b'diavad, you're yotze. But lechatchila, you shouldn't do it. That's how we have to read the Mishnah. And we'll say it's all, the Tanna Kama is saying that when it says that you're yotze, even though you can't hear the words of Shema, that's b'diavad. And then he fits with Truma, he fits with benching. Ella, but still, we have a different problem. Hadatang Rabbi Yehuda braid Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. What about the teaching of Rabbi Yehuda, different Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi? If you have a deaf person who can speak and can't hear, Tarem lechatchila. He could separate Truma lechatchila. So now we have an opinion that says that even though you can't hear, you can separate Truma lechatchila. Mani, who's that like at this point? Lo Rabbi Yehuda, v'lo Rabbi Yossi. That's not like our current version of Rabbi Yehuda, and it's not like our current version of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yehuda, Because if it was Rabbi Yehuda, this teaching of Rabbi Yehuda about braid Rabbi Shimon Pazi is saying that even though you can't hear, lechatchila you can separate truma. At this point, we are trying to assume, we're at this step of the Gemara, we're having Rabbi Yehuda of our Mishnah hold that it never works lechatchila, only b'diavad. So, ha'amar diavad in lechatchila lo. He says that only b'diavad it works, but not lechatchila. And Rabbi Yossi, and if it's like Rabbi Yossi, ha'amar diavad nami lo. Rabbi Yossi at this point is holding that it never works b'diavad. Because we only have one Rabbi Yossi at this point, which is Rabbi Yossi of our Mishnah, who's saying that even b'diavad it doesn't work if you can't hear yourself. So who are we? Who is this Mishnah, this Brisa of Reb Shimon Pazi, of Rabbi Yehuda braid Reb Shimon Pazi going to go like? So Elol Olam Rabbi Yehuda, we'll really say is Rabbi Yehuda. V'afilu l'chatchila nami, and Rabbi Yehuda could hold that even l'chatchila it works, even though you can't hear yourself. V'lo kashya, but it's not a contradiction. Even though we've been saying, where we're holding now, Rabbi Yehuda holds only l'chatchila, that l'chatchila one shouldn't do if they can't hear, but b'diavad it works. And now we're saying that even l'chatchila one could. It's not a problem. Hadidei hadarabe. One is his opinion, one is the opinion of his Rabbi. Rabbi Yehuda himself holds that even l'chatchila you could do it. And he would fit like and that brisa, Rabbi Yehuda, the name of Rabbi Shimon Pazi, would be going like Rabbi Yehuda's opinion himself, that lechatchila you don't have to be able to hear. And we could say that our Mishnah also holds that way, if we want. When our Mishnah says, if you read Shema and you can't hear, you're yotze, it means even lechatchila you can read Shema without being able to hear. And the opinion that says lechatchila you shouldn't, but b'diavad it works, that's Rabbi, that's his Rabbi. Did not, because we have a Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Yehuda said the name of his Rabbi, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, HaKoreh Shema Tzarech Sheyashmiya Le'azno. When we read Shema, he needs to be able to hear it. Shenemar Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. As it says, here Israel Hashem is one. You should hear it. But the language of Tzarech, Rashi explains, you need to, is not a language of, like, you're obligated to. Need to means like, this is how you should do it, Lichatchila, but b'diavad, you would still be Yotzei. So now we have Rabbi Yehuda, the name of his Rabbi, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, holding that lechatchila you should be able to hear, but b'diavad you're still yotzei. So the brisa, the first brisa about truma that said lechatchila, a person who can't hear himself shouldn't do it, but b'diavad it works. And the brisa about benching that said lechatchila one shouldn't bench in their heart, but b'diavad it works, are going to be going like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, like the Rabbi of Rabbi Yehuda. Because Rabbi Yehuda quotes his Rabbi, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that when it comes to Shema, he needs to be able to hear it, but if he doesn't, b'diavad it's still going to work. Now that Mishnah continues, and it says, Amar le Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir said to him, Harei Omer. But the pasuk says, Asher anochi mitzavecha yom al levavecha, that I command you today on your heart, which teaches me achar kavanas halev hang hadvarim, that it follows the intent of the heart. Says Rabbi Meir that no, even lechatchila you could say in your heart. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah that lechatchila, if you can't hear yourself say Shema, okay, if a person can't actually hear, the case of the Charish who can't hear, that's a different type of case. But our Mishnah is actually talking about somebody who is capable of hearing, they just are in a situation where they can't hear. I don't know, they block their ears or something. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is saying lechatchila you have to be able to hear it, but b'diavad you're yotzei. Rabbi Meir says, no, even lechatchila it's fine. It says, al levavecha has to be on your heart. Fine. So it brings in this new opinion of Rabbi Meir, and it brings in as an aside, really. But now, says the Gemara, hashdasis lahachi. Now that you've introduced us to the opinion of Rabbi Meir, we have a new player here. We have a new opinion here. So then, afilu tema Rabbi Yehuda k'Rabbi svirle. Now we could say that Rabbi Yehuda holds like his Rabbi, that in general, with all these situations where you can't hear, we say lechatchila you shouldn't do it, but b'diavad you're yotzei. That would be Rabbi Yehuda of our Mishnah. That would be the first case of truma, that would be the case of benching, and that would be this Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah. The lokashia, now what about the Rabbi Yehuda Braid Reb Shimon Pazi, who said that when it came to truma, even lechatchila, someone you can't hear himself could separate truma? We'll say Rabbi Meir. That would be going like Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda. The other things would be going like Rabbi Yehuda. So the other case of truma, the other opinion about truma. So we had two opinions really about truma. The first original one was that if you can't hear yourself, l'chatchila, you shouldn't separate truma. If you can't hear the bracha, but b'diavad you're yotze. We'll say that's Rabbi Yehuda. L'chatchila, you shouldn't. If you can't hear, b'diavad you're yotze. The brisa that brought the opinion that even l'chatchila you could separate truma even if you can't hear yourself, that would be going like Rabbi Meir, who's saying that here by Shema, we say al levecha on your heart, that you don't actually have to be able to hear it. That's true for Shema, and Rabbi Meir would say that that's also true for truma, and that would be the opinion of the brisa of Rabbi Yehuda Braid Reb Shimon Pazi, that you could separate truma l'chatchila even if you can't hear your own bracha. Okay, we'll pick up from here next time.